Amara Johnson sat at the head of the conference table, her gaze fixed on the flickering screen in front of her as numbers flashed by. Quarterly projections, morale reports, and resignation rates blended together into an overwhelming tide of red flags. Her company, an innovative tech startup she'd built from scratch, was drowning in a sea of problems. Across the table, her chief operating officer, Greg Morrison, adjusted his tie, a sign she knew meant he was about to deliver more bad news. "We've lost 6 more engineers this month alone," Greg said, his tone steely. "And we're not just losing the young recruits. Senior staff are leaving too, citing toxic workplace culture in their exit interviews. If this keeps up, we'll have a skeleton crew by next quarter." Amara clenched her jaw, masking her frustration. "We offer competitive salaries, flexible hours, mental health days. How could the culture be toxic?" Across from her, a few other executives exchanged uneasy glances. Greg shrugged. "It's not something we can fix with benefits, Amara. There are rumors of favoritism, and some employees feel overlooked by management. It's affecting productivity and morale. Some are even saying they feel disrespected." Her heart sank. She prided herself on her open-door policy, her commitment to making every team member feel valued. She glanced around the room at the faces of her trusted executives, trying to discern if any of them were holding something back. "If any of you have more specific feedback, I want to hear it. We need transparency now more than ever." Silence blanketed the room, thick with hesitation. Finally, Greg cleared his throat. "Maybe it's time to consider other options. We could look into restructuring, downsizing, or even selling the company." Amara's stomach tightened. The thought of handing over her dream to strangers was intolerable. She'd built this company to uplift marginalized communities, to innovate for good. Selling wasn't an option, not unless she was sure there was no way to save it. Still, the severity of the issues Greg raised lingered, gnawing at her. She felt distant, out of touch, as if her vision had somehow slipped away from her, buried under layers of bureaucracy. She drummed her fingers on the polished wood of the conference table, mind racing. "I'm not ready to give up. We'll get to the bottom of this." "What do you propose?" Greg's question was careful, almost challenging. A sudden, unorthodox idea took shape in her mind. "I'm going to go undercover. I want to see for myself what's happening on the ground level." The room erupted in a chorus of objections. Her VP of HR raised concerns about her safety, while Greg questioned the efficacy of such a drastic move. But Amara silenced them with a raised hand, her determination stealing into resolve. "I'm serious. I can't fix this if I don't understand it. We need answers, and we need them now." Greg sighed, exchanging a reluctant glance with the others. "If you're going to do this, you'll need a cover. Something that won't raise suspicion." Amara thought for a moment, considering the positions that would allow her the most exposure without drawing attention. "I'll go in as a janitor. No one notices them, but they're everywhere. They see things others don't." Greg's brows knitted together, but he eventually nodded. "Fine. But I'll need to know your whereabouts at all times." "No," she replied firmly. "Only my executive assistant Lila will know. The fewer people in on this, the better." Greg sighed but didn't argue further. Her mind was made up. The plan was in motion. The following morning, Amara arrived at her own company through the employee entrance. Dressed in worn jeans, a loose sweatshirt, and scuffed sneakers, she looked every bit the new hire she was pretending to be. She'd pulled her hair back into a low ponytail and wore a cheap pair of glasses to complete the transformation. She even carried an old, second-hand phone instead of her usual high-tech device, and her executive ID badge was nowhere to be found. Her introduction was quick and impersonal. Donna, the senior janitor, handed her a set of keys and pointed her toward the storage closet where the cleaning supplies were kept. "You're in charge of the east wing on the 3rd floor," Donna said, barely looking up from her clipboard. "Make sure to empty the trash, mop the floors, and restock the bathrooms. We don't have time for slacking off around here." Amara nodded, trying to appear meek, even though her instincts fought against it. She took her supplies and headed to her designated area, scanning the building with new eyes. It felt strange being here as an outsider in her own space. Employees bustled past her without a second glance, absorbed in their own routines. No one recognized her. She was invisible, just as she'd hoped. As she began her duties, the reality of her new position sank in. The work was physically taxing, a stark contrast to her usual role behind a desk. Her hands ached from scrubbing floors, and her back protested after hours of bending and lifting. But the discomfort was worth it. She was finally getting a glimpse into the everyday lives of her employees. Around mid-morning, she encountered Jordan, the floor manager. Tall and imposing, He exuded an air of superiority, as though he were above the people around him. When he noticed her, he barely concealed his disdain. "You missed a spot," he sneered, pointing to a smudge on the floor near his office. "Try to keep this area clean. I don't want to see any dirt around my workspace." Amara bit back her retort, forcing herself to nod submissively. "Yes, sir. I'll take care of it." Jordan smirked, clearly satisfied, and walked away without another word. As she scrubbed the floor, she couldn't shake the feeling that his disdain was about more than just her position. She'd encountered enough microaggressions in her life to recognize them, even when subtle. Throughout the day, she heard whispers and side comments from her coworkers. Jordan's disdainful glances were only part of it. Other employees exchanged knowing looks when she passed, muttering things she could barely catch, remarks about outsiders and quota hires that made her blood boil. How had she been so blind to this toxicity brewing under her nose? By lunchtime, she was exhausted, physically and mentally. She found herself in the break room, hoping for a few moments of solitude. But the break room was far from quiet. A group of employees gathered at a table nearby, talking in hushed voices. "I heard we're getting a new CEO soon," one of them said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Apparently, Amara's not fit for the job." Amara's stomach twisted. She kept her head down, listening intently. "Yeah, I heard Greg's making moves with the board," another chimed in. "I mean, the company was better off before she took over, anyway. This diversity experiment's tanking us." She clenched her fists under the table. The betrayal stung more than she expected. Greg had been with her since the early days, someone she'd trusted implicitly. The implications were clear. He was positioning himself to take control, and her employees weren't just disgruntled, some actively wanted her gone. Her thoughts raced, a mixture of anger and disappointment clouding her mind. If Greg was indeed plotting against her, it meant the rod extended all the way to the top. Her mission had just become more complex and more dangerous. For the rest of the day, she worked in silence, her mind consumed by the fragments of conversation she'd overheard. With every floor mopped and trash can emptied, she felt her sense of betrayal deepen. The company she had nurtured, the people she'd empowered, were slipping through her fingers. By evening, Amara was more resolved than ever. She would get to the root of this toxicity, even if it meant confronting the people she once trusted most. Tomorrow, she would begin gathering evidence. She would observe, listen, and uncover the truth. Her company depended on it. As she walked out that night, unnoticed and unacknowledged by the very people she'd employed, Amara felt an unexpected wave of determination. This undercover mission was no longer just about solving a management problem. It was about reclaiming her vision and rebuilding her company from the ground up. The following day, Amara entered the building with renewed resolve, slipping quietly into her role as Marie once again. After the previous day's revelations, she knew that every interaction, every snippet of overheard conversation, could reveal the festering issues plaguing her company. She moved through her assigned floors, pushing her cart and pretending to focus solely on cleaning, but her ears were alert, her mind sharp, cataloging every observation. By mid-morning, she found herself in the break room again, this time cleaning the tables and wiping down the counters. A group of employees was gathered nearby, engaged in a conversation that caught her attention. She recognized two of them: Sandra, a project manager in her 30s who'd been with the company since its early days, and Derek, a newer addition to the marketing team. They spoke in low voices, but the tone was tense. "I don't know how much longer I can take this," Sandra muttered. "Jordan's breathing down everyone's neck, and he's never satisfied with anything. He's always got something nasty to say about the way I handle things. I swear, he's just waiting for me to slip up." Derek nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, I've noticed he's particularly harsh on you and a few others. I'm new here, but even I can tell who he plays favorites with." Sandra glanced around, lowering her voice even more. "It's worse than you think. I've been passed over for promotions twice now. Jordan keeps saying I need to prove myself more, but he's given guys with half my experience higher positions. And it's not just me, he does the same to everyone who doesn't fit his mold." The bitterness in her voice struck a chord with Amara. She continued scrubbing the counters, her head down, hoping to hear more without drawing attention. The conversation continued, touching on Jordan's preferential treatment and his tendency to single out employees who didn't conform to his expectations, especially women and people of color. "Honestly," Sandra said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm starting to think it's not even worth sticking around. It's like they don't value us at all. We're just cogs in the machine, dispensable." Amara's chest tightened. She'd built this company to be different, to empower people like Sandra, to give them a place where they could thrive and be respected. But here, in the very heart of her own organization, people felt marginalized and dismissed. It was a harsh truth, and it stung more deeply than she had anticipated. Later, as she pushed her cart down the hallway, she encountered Jordan himself. He was standing by the elevator, checking his phone, a permanent scowl etched on his face. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, his gaze lingered on her with a mix of irritation and disdain. "You're new, right?" he asked, though he didn't seem particularly interested in her answer. "Yes, sir," she replied, keeping her voice quiet. "Good. I need you to clean my office thoroughly. It's a mess, and I don't have time for half-hearted work. Understood?" "Yes, sir," she repeated, maintaining her composure despite the surge of anger his tone evoked. He turned away, muttering something under his breath that she barely caught. It's impossible to get decent help these days. She felt a pang of resentment but held it back, reminding herself of her purpose. This was about more than her pride. It was about uncovering the truth. When she reached his office, she was struck by the stacks of papers scattered across his desk, coffee stains on the table, and a clutter of documents on every surface. She began cleaning, her eyes scanning the room, cataloging the chaos. Amidst the mess, a file caught her eye marked Project Redistribute. The title seemed innocuous, but something about it drew her attention. She glanced around, ensuring she was alone, and carefully slipped it into her cart. After finishing her cleaning, she took the file to a quiet corner near the supply closet, out of sight of the cameras. Flipping it open, she scanned the pages, her heart racing as she began to understand the contents. Project Redistribute outlined a plan for outsourcing a significant portion of the company's tech support jobs overseas, cutting costs by laying off dozens of current employees. What's more, it was clear that Greg, her COO, was pushing for this change with Jordan's support. The implications were staggering. Greg had framed this outsourcing initiative as a way to streamline the business, but it was clear from the documentation that his primary goal was to boost profits at the expense of loyal employees. This wasn't just about efficiency, it was about betrayal. She closed the file, feeling a surge of determination. This was exactly the kind of underhanded maneuvering she'd feared, the kind of ruthless profit-driven strategy she'd always opposed. Over the next few days, Amara kept a low profile, diligently performing her janitorial duties while keeping an ear out for further insights. She became a silent observer, witnessing the casual conversations and office politics that unfolded around her. It didn't take long for her to notice a pattern. Favoritism was rampant, with a clear divide between those who were in Jordan's good graces and those who weren't. The favored employees received better assignments, lighter workloads, and even extra days off, while others like Sandra were burdened with extra responsibilities, often without acknowledgement or reward. One afternoon, she overheard a particularly disheartening exchange in the cafeteria. Jordan was speaking to another manager, Richard, laughing about how he'd kept the place running despite Amara's weak leadership. He described her as too soft to make the tough decisions, scoffing at her emphasis on inclusivity and fair treatment. "She just doesn't have what it takes," Jordan sneered. "This is a business, not a charity. Greg gets that." Richard chuckled in agreement, adding, "Guess she'll be out of the picture soon enough." The weight of their words settled heavily on her shoulders. Her own management team was openly disrespecting her vision, undermining her authority, and planning to push her out. It was becoming clear that Greg and Jordan had a plan in motion, one that involved sidelining her to reshape the company according to their own cutthroat values. As Amara continued her work, she started to build alliances with other marginalized employees. Sandra, whom she had met in the break room, quickly became one of her most trusted contacts. Sandra confided in her about the daily struggles she faced, from being belittled in meetings to being passed over for projects she was more than qualified to lead. Amara listened, absorbing every detail, her anger mounting with each story. These were talented, dedicated individuals, and they were being pushed to the sidelines simply because they didn't fit a certain mold. One evening, while tidying up the supply closet, she ran into Donna, the senior janitor who had initially shown her around. Donna had been with the company for years, watching it evolve from its humble beginnings to the bustling organization it was today. They struck up a conversation, and as Amara subtly probed, Donna's guarded demeanor softened. "This place used to be different," Donna said, leaning on her mop handle, her gaze distant. "When you first started out, everyone felt like they had a purpose. People cared about each other. But now, it's just another job. They don't care about us anymore." Amara nodded, her heart heavy. "What do you think changed?" Donna hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "It's the management. They don't care about us down here. To them, we're replaceable. They only see numbers, not people. And that Jordan," she shook her head, "he's got a nasty streak. I've seen him talk down to people, make jokes that cut deep. I've even seen him mess with people's schedules just because he doesn't like them. Amara's pulse quickened. Donna's words confirmed everything she'd been witnessing. Her company had become a place where people like Donna were dismissed, belittled, and mistreated, all under the watch of those she'd entrusted to lead. That night, as she walked back to her modest apartment, Amara's mind raced with plans. She couldn't allow this to continue. But she also knew she couldn't rush into action without solid evidence. She needed proof of Jordan and Greg's collusion, documentation of the mistreatment, and enough to justify a complete overhaul. The stakes were higher than ever, but she was ready to confront them head-on. Amara began to compile everything she'd learned, making mental notes of key details and organizing her observations. She knew the risks involved, but she also knew that reclaiming her vision for the company was worth every challenge she might face. Over the following week, Amara continued gathering information, each day revealing deeper layers of the toxicity plaguing her company. The environment Jordan had fostered wasn't just disrespectful, it was corrosive. Employees lived in fear of his capricious moods, knowing that a single misstep could lead to public reprimand or worse. Amara's undercover role allowed her to see this in action, and each incident only fueled her determination to confront it head-on. One afternoon, she witnessed an incident that epitomized the culture Jordan had cultivated. Sandra had been tasked with leading a project that required collaboration with multiple departments, and she was giving a presentation in one of the glass-walled conference rooms. Amara watched from the hallway, feigning disinterest as she mopped the floor nearby, but in truth she was hanging on every word. Sandra's presentation was thorough, detailing how different teams could streamline their workflows to boost productivity and reduce bottlenecks. But Jordan, sitting in the front row with his arms crossed and an expression of barely concealed contempt, interrupted her repeatedly, nitpicking every detail and undermining her in front of her peers. "Did you even consult the marketing team on this?" he snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. "Because I don't see how any of this aligns with our current branding strategy." Sandra's face flushed, but she held her ground. "I discussed the plan with both the marketing and design teams last week, and they were supportive of the direction. We've been collaborating closely to ensure alignment." Jordan leaned back, smirking. "Well, maybe they were too polite to tell you that this is a waste of time." His gaze swept over the room, inviting the rest of the team to laugh along with him. A few people chuckled nervously, but most looked away, uncomfortable with his overt hostility. Amara's hands tightened around the mop handle, barely restraining herself from storming into the room and calling him out. She'd built her company to encourage collaboration, not public humiliation, but she knew her moment would come. She needed more than anger to dismantle the system Jordan had established. She needed undeniable proof. After Sandra's presentation ended, Amara found her in the hallway, her shoulders slumped, her face pale with frustration. Taking a chance, Amara approached her quietly, speaking in the same soft, deferential tone she'd adopted as Marie. "That presentation was really well done," she said gently. "You didn't deserve what happened in there." Sandra looked at her, surprised, as if she hadn't expected anyone to reach out. "Thanks, Marie, right?" she replied, attempting a smile. "It's just the way things are here. You keep your head down, try to do good work, and hope it's enough." Amara shook her head. "It shouldn't have to be that way." Sandra sighed, looking away. "It's hard to fight the system when it's people like Jordan at the top. He's got the board wrapped around his finger, and anyone who tries to challenge him ends up pushed out. There's no real accountability." Amara nodded, her mind whirring with possibilities. She couldn't reveal her true identity to Sandra, not yet, but she wanted her to know that things could change. "Maybe someone will stand up to him one day," she said, more to herself than Sandra. "Maybe it just takes the right person." Sandra looked at her, a glimmer of hope in her tired eyes. "Maybe." Over the next few days, Amara continued gathering evidence. She learned that Jordan had not only harassed employees, but had actively sabotaged projects he didn't personally approve of. He rerouted resources, ignored requests, and manipulated schedules, making it nearly impossible for teams he didn't favor to succeed. And his manipulation wasn't limited to employees. Amara discovered he'd been misreporting project delays to make it seem as though certain departments were underperforming, setting them up for cuts and justifying his own push for outsourcing. One evening, as she was emptying trash cans in the quiet of the office after hours, she spotted Greg's office light still on. Knowing this was a rare opportunity, she moved closer, hoping to hear something useful. Inside, she could hear Greg speaking on the phone, his voice low and tense. "I'm telling you, she's going to get in the way if we don't act soon," he was saying, frustration thick in his tone. "I've already started laying the groundwork for the transition. Once we push her out, we can make the changes we need without all this, Compassion nonsense. Amara's blood ran cold. She had suspected his betrayal, but hearing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. This wasn't just about protecting her company anymore, it was personal. Greg, the man she'd trusted to help her grow her business, was plotting her downfall with as much enthusiasm as he once showed for her vision. As she continued listening, Greg went on to outline his plan for restructuring, mentioning a few of the board members by name. He spoke with a calculated indifference, as though displacing dozens of employees and tearing apart her vision was just another task on his checklist. Amara clenched her fists, struggling to control her anger. She couldn't blow her cover yet, not when she was so close to gathering everything she needed. That night she called her assistant Lila, who was the only person who knew her true identity and undercover mission. They met in a dimly lit cafe, away from prying eyes, and Amara shared everything she'd uncovered. "It's worse than I thought," she admitted, voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Jordan is manipulating projects, playing favorites, and spreading lies about the departments he doesn't like. And Greg, he's actively working to push me out, framing it as restructuring." Lila shook her head, disgust evident on her face. "So, what's the plan? You can't just confront them without concrete evidence." "I know," Amara said, determination stealing her gaze. "We're going to start gathering recordings, testimonies, anything that will expose the truth. I'll need your help coordinating it without raising suspicion." Lila nodded. "I'll handle the logistics, but Amara, be careful. Greg and Jordan are ruthless. If they find out what you're doing, they won't hesitate to shut you down." Amara's jaw tightened. "Let them try. They've underestimated me for far too long." The next morning she returned to work as Marie, armed with a renewed sense of purpose. She quietly spoke to several employees, subtly gaining their trust, and over time, they began to share more openly about their experiences. She learned that Sandra had once been nominated for a promotion, only for Jordan to block it in favor of a less qualified friend of his. She heard stories of projects mysteriously losing funding, leaving teams scrambling to meet deadlines with half the resources they'd started with. And the more she learned, the clearer the pattern became. Anyone who didn't align with Jordan and Greg's vision of the company was systematically silenced, pushed aside, or eliminated. One afternoon, she managed to corner Richard, a junior manager who had been present during the conversation she'd overheard in the cafeteria. She had observed his discomfort during that interaction, and she suspected he might have a conscience buried beneath his ambition. "Hey, Richard," she greeted him casually, feigning shyness. "Can I ask you something?" Richard looked taken aback, clearly not expecting a janitor to address him so directly. Sure." "Do you ever feel like things around here are a bit unfair?" she asked, her tone carefully measured. "Like some people don't get the recognition they deserve?" Richard hesitated, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Look, Marie, I don't know what you've heard, but this place isn't exactly equal. If you're in with the right people, things are smooth. If not," he trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. Amara nodded sympathetically. "Must be tough for the people who are out of the loop." Richard shrugged, looking away. "It is what it is. Just stay out of it, okay? Trust me, things can get ugly if you're not careful." Amara watched him walk away, her mind racing. His warning was clear. There were risks involved, even for those who only observed from the sidelines. But she couldn't back down now. She was too deep into this, and too much was at stake. By the end of the week, Amara felt ready to take the next step. She'd gathered enough stories, enough glimpses into the insidious culture her leadership team had allowed to thrive. But now she needed tangible evidence, something that would be irrefutable. She decided to confide in Donna, hoping her years of loyalty would make her an ally. In a quiet moment in the break room, Amara approached Donna, lowering her voice. "Donna, have you ever felt like things here aren't what they used to be?" Donna gave her a sad, knowing smile. "You're not the first person to notice, Marie. This place used to have heart. Now, it's just another corporate machine grinding people down." Amara hesitated, then took a leap of faith. "If I told you there might be a way to change that, to bring back the heart we lost, would you help me?" Donna studied her, a spark of hope flickering in her eyes. "What do you need?" Amara exhaled, relieved. "I need someone who's seen the worst of it to back me up. And I need you to trust me, even if things get difficult." Donna nodded, determination hardening her gaze. "You have my word. Whatever you need, I'm here." With Donna's support secured, Amara felt a surge of confidence. She was building a small network, a quiet resistance within her own company. The groundwork was laid, and now, with Donna and a few loyal employees on her side, she was ready to gather the final pieces of evidence. She knew the next phase would require careful planning and precise execution. But for the first time since she'd gone undercover, she felt a glimmer of hope. Her company wasn't lost yet, and she would fight tooth and nail to reclaim it from those who had twisted it beyond recognition. Over the following days, Amara continued to gather evidence with a new sense of urgency. Each interaction, each whispered conversation, and each instance of abuse of power only strengthened her resolve to confront the corrosive leadership that had poisoned her company. With Donna's quiet support and the testimonies she'd gathered from employees like Sandra, she knew she was getting closer to the proof she needed. But she also knew she had to be cautious. Greg and Jordan were sharp, and a single slip could ruin everything she'd worked for. One late afternoon, while tidying the break room, she overheard Jordan speaking to another manager. They were laughing, their voices dripping with contempt. "I told you she wouldn't last long," Jordan was saying. "Amara's been too soft from the start. All that talk about company values and inclusive culture. Please. That's not how you run a successful business." The manager, a man named Alan who had aligned himself with Jordan, chuckled in agreement. "I never understood why she bothered with that nonsense anyway. Diversity quotas, team building exercises, it's all just a waste of time. We're here to make money, not to babysit a bunch of overly sensitive employees." Amara felt her blood boil as she listened. The very things she'd instilled in the company values she believed would set them apart were being openly mocked and dismissed. Jordan and Alan's laughter continued, their disdain evident as they derided the very foundation of her vision. It was painful to hear, but it confirmed what she already suspected. They had no interest in the well-being of the employees or the company's original mission. As the conversation faded, Amara quickly made her way to the janitorial closet, where she kept her phone hidden. She recorded a voice memo, summarizing the exchange and adding it to the growing collection of evidence. With each piece she gathered, the picture of betrayal grew clearer, and her determination only deepened. The following morning she approached Donna with a new plan. They needed more than just testimonials and observations, they needed hard, indisputable proof of Jordan and Greg's schemes. Donna, as the senior janitor, had access to most areas of the building, including the executive offices after hours. Amara proposed that Donna help her gain access to Jordan's office late at night when the building was empty. If they could find documents, emails, anything concrete, it would strengthen their case. Donna was hesitant at first, clearly aware of the risks, but after a moment of consideration she nodded. "If it means exposing the truth and stopping them, then I'm in," she said, her voice resolute. That night, Amara waited until the building was nearly empty. She met Donna by the janitorial closet, where they retrieved the master keys. Together, they moved silently through the empty halls, the hum of the building's air conditioning the only sound breaking the silence. They reached Jordan's office, and Donna unlocked the door, stepping aside to let Amara enter. Amara quickly got to work, sifting through the papers on Jordan's desk, opening drawers, and scanning the files stacked on the shelves. Most of it was routine paperwork, but eventually she found a folder labeled Internal Reallocation. Opening it, she saw detailed plans for outsourcing projects, complete with schedules for employee layoffs, budget cuts, and projected savings. The documents clearly outlined a strategy to replace a significant portion of the workforce with cheaper, outsourced labor, just as she'd suspected. She took photos of each page, documenting the evidence, her heart pounding as she worked. Donna kept watch by the door, her eyes darting down the hallway, alert for any signs of movement. As Amara snapped the last photo, she noticed an email printout tucked between the pages of the folder. It was from Greg, addressed to Jordan, discussing the plan in chillingly casual terms. Greg had written, "Once we get her out of the way, we'll have free rein. We need to keep up appearances until the board's convinced, but then it's a clean sweep. This company will finally operate with some real efficiency." Amara's stomach churned. The betrayal was more brazen than she'd imagined. Greg and Jordan had been working together to dismantle everything she'd built, driven purely by profit and ambition, with no regard for the people whose lives would be upended. She photographed the email, her hands trembling as she captured the damning words. Just as she was about to close the folder, she heard footsteps echoing down the hall. She froze and Donna's eyes widened, signaling her to stay still. They listened as the footsteps grew closer, and then stopped just outside the office door. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a thunderous reminder of the risk they were taking. Donna moved quickly, grabbing a nearby mop and bucket, and positioned herself in the hallway, pretending to clean as though it were part of her regular duties. The footsteps lingered, then moved on, fading into the distance. Amara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her relief palpable. Once the coast was clear, She slipped out of the office, nodding her thanks to Donna as they made their way back to the janitorial closet. She had the evidence she needed, but the danger had never felt more real. The following day, Amara met with Lila to review the evidence she'd gathered. They went over the photos, the recordings, and the testimonies, piecing together a comprehensive picture of the toxic environment Jordan and Greg had cultivated. Lila was visibly shocked, her usual calm demeanor shaken as she read through the documents. "This is unbelievable," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been plotting this for months. If you hadn't gone undercover, they would have gotten away with it." Amara nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over her. "I know. But now we have enough to bring this to the board. We'll expose them for what they've done, and make sure they're held accountable." Lila glanced at her, worry etched into her features. "Just be careful. They're not going to go down without a fight. Greg, especially, he's resourceful, and he's not going to let you take him down easily." Amara met her gaze, her resolve unwavering. "I'm prepared for whatever they throw at me. This company was built on values they've trampled over. I'm not going to let them destroy it." With the plan in motion, Amara prepared for the board meeting. She knew this was her chance to reclaim control, to restore the integrity of the company she had built. But she also knew the risks. Greg and Jordan were powerful, and they had likely anticipated some resistance. She needed to be meticulous to ensure her case was airtight. On the day of the meeting, Amara arrived early, dressed in her usual professional attire. Gone was the disguise of Marie the janitor. Today, she would face her betrayers as the CEO she was. She walked into the conference room, head held high, carrying the folder of evidence she'd gathered. The board members filed in, exchanging polite nods and greetings, though Amara sensed an undercurrent of tension. Greg and Jordan entered last, their expressions carefully neutral. Greg met her gaze with a look of thinly veiled disdain, as if daring her to confront him. Once everyone was seated, Amara took a deep breath and began. She laid out the evidence with precision, presenting each piece in turn: the outsourcing plans, the emails between Greg and Jordan, the testimonies from employees who had been bullied and marginalized. As she spoke, she saw the board members' expressions shift from confusion to shock, and finally to anger. Jordan's face grew pale as the scope of the evidence became clear, while Greg's expression darkened, his jaw clenched. He attempted to interject, dismissing her accusations as unsubstantiated claims and questioning the authenticity of her evidence, but Amara remained firm, her voice unwavering. "I went undercover in my own company," she said, her gaze steady as she addressed the board. "I saw firsthand how employees are treated, how favoritism and bullying have become the norm under Jordan's leadership. And I have proof that Greg has been actively working to undermine me, prioritizing profit over people, and planning to dismantle everything we stand for." A murmur spread through the room as board members exchanged incredulous glances. One of them, a longtime ally of Amara's, finally spoke up. "Is this true, Greg? Have you been working behind Amara's back to push her out?" Greg's face hardened, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. "This company needs strong leadership," he said, his tone dripping with defiance. "Amara's vision is outdated. She's too sentimental, too focused on idealism. We need to be profitable, not bogged down by useless policies." Amara met his gaze, her voice calm but resolute. "Profit doesn't have to come at the expense of our values, Greg. This company was built to uplift people, not exploit them. And I won't stand by while you tear it down." The board erupted into heated discussion, some members siding with Amara, while others seemed swayed by Greg's argument for profitability. Jordan attempted to defend himself, but the overwhelming evidence against him left him floundering. One by one, the board members turned their scrutiny on him, their anger palpable as they realized the extent of his misconduct. After what felt like an eternity, the board chair called for silence. He looked at Amara, then at Greg and Jordan, his expression unreadable. "Given the evidence presented, I propose an immediate investigation into these claims. Until it is complete, Greg and Jordan will be placed on administrative leave." A mixture of relief and triumph flooded Amara's chest. She had done it, she had exposed the truth and taken the first step toward reclaiming her company. As the board members filed out, she caught Greg's glare, his face twisted with hatred. She knew this wasn't the end, there would be more battles to fight. But for now, she had won the first round. With the truth finally out, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would rebuild her company, restoring it to the vision she'd always intended. And this time she would make sure no one ever threatened its foundation again. The following days were a whirlwind for Amara. The board had initiated a full investigation, putting Greg and Jordan on administrative leave and appointing Amara to oversee the restructuring process. Though she had won a significant battle, she knew the war wasn't over. Greg's parting glare and Jordan's smug defiance lingered in her mind, reminding her that they weren't likely to disappear quietly. Amara quickly mobilized her small network of loyal employees, including Sandra and Donna, to gather feedback from the staff about how the workplace could improve. She wanted to hear from everyone their ideas, their frustrations, and most importantly, their hopes for the future. She knew she had to act fast to rebuild trust and restore faith in the company's mission. At the same time, she began reviewing the files and data Greg had left behind. As she sifted through them, she found more evidence of his manipulations: budgets intentionally skewed to favor his personal projects, funds funneled into departments he controlled, and exaggerated performance reports that painted certain teams in an unflattering light. It was clear that Greg had been orchestrating this power play for months, if not longer, meticulously laying the groundwork to seize control and reshape the company in his image. One morning, as she was sorting through the files in her office, Lila knocked on her door and stepped in, a concerned look on her face. "Amara, there's something you need to see," she said, handing over a folder marked whistleblower complaints. Amara opened the folder and scanned the documents. They were anonymous reports from employees detailing instances of bullying, discrimination, and unethical behavior. Some of the reports were heartbreaking, recounting stories of talented employees forced out by the toxic culture, while others were furious, denouncing the favoritism and double standards that had plagued the company under Greg and Jordan's leadership. "These are damning," Amara murmured, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." Lila nodded, her expression grim. These employees were silenced, ignored, or pushed out. They had no one to turn to because Greg and Jordan made sure there were no avenues for complaints. They shut down every attempt to report misconduct. Amara clenched her jaw, realizing how deeply the corruption had permeated her company. "This has to change," she said firmly. "I won't allow this to happen again." Together, they outlined a plan to create an anonymous, third-party platform where employees could report issues safely. Amara wanted to ensure that every voice was heard and that there would be accountability moving forward. She knew that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight, but this would be a critical first step. In the meantime, she held several all-staff meetings to address the situation openly. She shared as much as she could about the investigation, being transparent about the changes coming to the company. Standing in front of her employees, she admitted the mistakes that had been made, promising to restore the integrity and values the company was founded upon. As she spoke, she noticed a mixture of expressions in the crowd, some hopeful, others skeptical, and a few outright indifferent. She knew that regaining everyone's trust would be an uphill battle, but she was willing to put in the work. After the meeting, Sandra approached her, a small, hesitant smile on her face. "It means a lot that you're being honest with us, Amara. A lot of us were starting to lose hope." Amara placed a hand on Sandra's shoulder, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "I appreciate that, Sandra. I know I can't undo the damage overnight, but I promise I'll fight for this place for all of us." Sandra nodded, visibly moved. "If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." As the days went on, Amara focused on repairing the fractured company culture. She instituted policies that promoted transparency and accountability, set up regular feedback sessions, and established a mentorship program to support professional growth for everyone. She wanted her employees to know that they mattered and that they had a future within the company. One evening, as she was wrapping up work, her assistant Lila knocked on her door, looking unusually tense. "There's been a complication with the investigation," Lila said, her voice low. Amara looked up, her heart sinking. "What happened?" "Greg's pushing back hard. He's claiming that you're conducting a personal vendetta against him, and he's trying to rally some of the board members to his side. He's spinning it as if you're unstable, that you're the one undermining the company." Amara's jaw tightened. She had expected resistance, but Greg's audacity still managed to shock her. "I should have known he wouldn't go down without a fight." "He's apparently hired a PR firm to control the narrative," Lila added. "They're already working to cast doubt on your leadership." Amara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that if she let Greg control the public perception, it could damage her credibility and hinder her efforts to turn the company around. She needed to take control of the situation. The next day, she scheduled a press conference, inviting members of the media to the company's headquarters. She stood at the podium, feeling the weight of every camera trained on her, every journalist waiting for her to speak. She knew she had to be direct and clear to make sure the truth cut through whatever narrative Greg was attempting to construct. "Over the past few weeks, I've come to understand that serious breaches of trust and integrity have taken place within this company," she began, her voice steady and resolute. "As the CEO, It is my responsibility to address these issues head-on. I cannot, and will not allow the values of this company to be compromised by those who seek personal gain at the expense of our employees and our mission. She went on to outline the evidence she'd uncovered, detailing the favoritism, bullying, and unethical practices that had come to light. She spoke about the anonymous complaints from employees, the plans for outsourcing, and the disregard for the values upon which the company was built. Her words were calm, measured, but they carried a force that left no room for doubt. When she finished, she opened the floor for questions. One reporter raised his hand and asked, "Amara, do you think there's a chance that Greg or Jordan could return to their roles within the company?" Amara met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "Absolutely not. They have violated the trust of this company and its employees. The values we uphold are non-negotiable. There is no place for those who undermine them." The press conference proved to be a turning point. The media coverage was overwhelmingly supportive, and the public began to rally behind her. The employees who had doubted her intentions saw the lengths she was willing to go to protect them, to stand up for the integrity of the company. Despite Greg's attempts to sway the board, his efforts began to lose traction. One by one, the board members who had wavered started to see through his manipulation, recognizing his actions for what they truly were. He had underestimated Amara's resilience and her unyielding commitment to her vision. A few weeks later, the board called a final meeting to conclude the investigation. Amara entered the conference room, meeting each board member's gaze with quiet confidence. Greg and Jordan were there as well, their expressions defiant, though she could see the flicker of anxiety in their eyes. The board chair began the meeting with a summary of the investigation's findings. It was a comprehensive account of Greg and Jordan's actions, detailing their manipulations, the toxic culture they had fostered, and the plans for outsourcing that would have gutted the company's workforce. The evidence was irrefutable. When the chair finished, he turned to Greg and Jordan, his face stern. "Based on these findings, we are left with no choice but to terminate your employment with immediate effect. Your actions have shown a complete disregard for the company's mission and the well-being of its employees. This company will move forward under Amara's leadership." Greg's face twisted with fury, but he said nothing, knowing he had been defeated. Jordan, too, looked away, his usual arrogance replaced by a sullen resignation. As they left the room, Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had faced down her betrayers, exposed the corruption that had infected her company, and emerged victorious. But she also knew that her work was far from finished. With Greg and Jordan gone, Amara turned her full attention to rebuilding the company's culture. She held additional town hall meetings, where employees were encouraged to speak openly about their experiences and share their visions for the company's future. She brought in new leaders who aligned with her values, individuals who understood the importance of integrity and respect in the workplace. Gradually, the company began to heal. Teams that had once been fractured by favoritism and distrust found new energy and purpose. The mentorship programs flourished, providing guidance and support for young talent, while the anonymous reporting platform became a cornerstone of the company's commitment to transparency and accountability. In time, Amara saw the impact of her efforts. Productivity increased, but more importantly, the employees felt valued and empowered. They were no longer just workers in a machine, they were part of a shared vision, united by the company's renewed dedication to its mission. One evening, as she walked through the office, she saw Sandra and Donna talking by the break room, laughing together. They spotted her and waved, genuine smiles lighting up their faces. Amara smiled back, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. She had fought hard to protect her company, and though the journey had been grueling, it had been worth every moment. She had reclaimed her vision, restored the values that had once defined her company, and built a foundation that would ensure its future. And as she looked around at the people who had stood by her, who had believed in her even when things seemed bleak, Amara knew she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had faced the darkness within her company, brought it to light, and emerged stronger, no longer just a CEO, but a true leader. In the weeks following Greg and Jordan's departure, Amara dedicated herself to transforming her company's culture from the inside out. The internal changes had already begun, but Amara knew that the journey wasn't complete. The company needed a new direction, one that would build on the original values she had instilled but would also address the evolving needs and challenges of the business. She decided to hold a company-wide event to unveil her vision for the future. As the event day arrived, anticipation buzzed through the office. Amara had arranged for an all-hands meeting in the main auditorium, bringing together every department and level of the company. She wanted everyone to feel connected to the mission, to understand that they were a part of something larger, and that each individual had a voice in shaping its future. Standing on the stage, she looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar and others new. She could see the mix of hope, curiosity, and even a bit of skepticism in the audience. Amara took a deep breath, letting the moment settle before she began. "Thank you all for being here today," she said, her voice steady and warm. "This company was founded with a purpose to bring people together, to foster innovation, and to make a positive impact. Recently, we've faced challenges that have tested our commitment to those values. But together, we have come through stronger, and today I'm excited to share our new path forward." She spoke about the recent changes, acknowledging the hard truths they had uncovered and the steps taken to address them. She explained the new structures in place, from the anonymous reporting platform to the mentorship programs designed to foster growth and collaboration. She didn't shy away from the past, understanding that transparency was key to building trust. Every word she spoke was deliberate, a promise to her employees that things were truly different now. Then she shifted her tone, brightening as she shared the plans for the future. She outlined new projects that would encourage cross-departmental collaboration, including initiatives that would focus on sustainability, diversity, and community engagement. She announced the formation of a council comprised of employees from all levels, tasked with ensuring that the company stayed true to its values while remaining adaptive and innovative. This council, she explained, would be an essential voice in major decisions moving forward. The audience was silent as they took in her words, the gravity of the new direction settling in. After a brief pause, she smiled and invited questions, welcoming anyone to speak openly. Hands shot up, and she answered each question thoughtfully, her commitment to transparency evident. Sandra, who was seated in the front row, stood up when it was her turn to speak. "I just want to say, on behalf of a lot of us, thank you, Amara. Thank you for listening, for fighting for us, and for showing us that our voices matter. It's been a long road, but today I feel hopeful about what we can achieve together." The room filled with applause, a genuine expression of gratitude from employees who had once felt silenced and overlooked. Amara felt a swell of pride and relief. She had taken the first steps toward transforming her company, and the support from her team only reinforced her belief in the new vision. In the days following the event, the changes began to take root. The mentorship program saw an influx of sign-ups, with senior employees volunteering to guide newer team members. The cross-departmental projects kicked off with enthusiasm, bringing together employees who might not have interacted otherwise. New voices emerged, individuals who had previously been in the background, now stepping forward with ideas and contributions that were met with respect and interest. Amara made it a point to walk the floors regularly, engaging with employees at all levels and listening to their experiences. She wanted to stay connected, to ensure that the changes weren't just words but were lived experiences for everyone at the company. The energy was different now. There was a palpable sense of empowerment, a feeling that they were all working towards something meaningful. One afternoon, as she made her rounds, she found herself in the break room, where she had once overheard whispers of dissent and betrayal. This time the atmosphere was lively, with groups of employees talking animatedly about upcoming projects and brainstorming ideas on the whiteboard walls she'd installed to encourage impromptu collaboration. Donna spotted her and waved her over. "It's good to see you, Amara," Donna said with a warm smile. "This place feels like home again." Amara smiled back, touched by the sentiment. "I couldn't have done it without people like you, Donna. You reminded me of the heart of this company." Donna chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "I just did what anyone who cared would have done. But it's nice to feel heard again." As Amara continued her walk, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The people who had supported her, who had stood by her through the darkest days, were now thriving in a company that valued their contributions. It wasn't perfect, yet she knew there would always be challenges and setbacks. But the foundation was strong, and she was confident that they would continue to build something meaningful together. The company's progress soon attracted the attention of the broader business community. Reports surfaced praising the turnaround, and Amara was invited to speak at several industry conferences. She shared her story candidly, detailing the lessons she had learned about leadership, resilience, and the importance of standing by one's values. Her transparency resonated with others, and she began receiving messages from leaders seeking advice on transforming their own workplaces. One day, she received a message that surprised her. It was from a former employee who had left the company during the turbulent period, disillusioned by the toxic environment. The message was a heartfelt note of thanks, expressing gratitude for the changes she had made and a desire to return to the company. It was a powerful reminder of the impact her actions had had, not only on current employees but on those who had felt they had no choice but to leave. Amara welcomed the former employee back with open arms, reaffirming her commitment to creating a workplace where people felt valued and respected. She began to see similar requests from other former employees who wanted to be a part of the new era she was building. It was a humbling experience, and it reinforced her belief in the power of integrity and perseverance. In time, Amara's company became a model for others in the industry. The new council played a pivotal role in guiding decisions, ensuring that the voices of employees were represented in every major change. The mentorship program blossomed, with senior leaders taking genuine pride in nurturing the next generation of talent. The sustainability initiatives launched, creating partnerships with local communities and environmental organizations, allowing the company to contribute positively beyond its walls. Reflecting on the journey, Amara felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced betrayal, uncovered uncomfortable truths, and had nearly lost everything she had built. But she had emerged stronger, her vision restored and fortified by the support of her employees. She was no longer just the founder or the CEO, she was a leader who had earned the trust of her team through resilience, honesty, and unwavering dedication to their shared purpose. As she stood in her office one evening, looking out over the bustling city, she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been arduous, but it had brought her closer to her team, her values, and herself. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Business was never easy, and the path forward would require constant adaptation and vigilance. But she also knew that she was surrounded by people who believed in her, who shared her vision, and who would stand by her through whatever came next. In the end, Amara's undercover mission had been more than a fight to save her company. It had been a journey of self-discovery, a testament to the strength of character and the power of a leader who refused to compromise on what mattered most. She had reclaimed her company, not just in title but in spirit, and together with her team, she looked forward to building a future grounded in trust, integrity, and a shared commitment to making a difference. The lights of the office dimmed as the last employees left for the day, but Amara remained by the window, a smile on her face, confident that the foundation they had built would stand strong for years to come.